health campaign called Healthy Monday. Today, I am going to chat with you about generally mindfulness in the workplace, more specifically conscious conflict resolution, ways to communicate more mindfully and strengthen those relationships at work. So a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, I would prefer that you just unmute yourselves and yell at me. I won't be able to see the chat box as I'm presenting. Hannah will monitor that if you guys want to type them in, but if you guys just want to chat, I'd prefer this be a conversation more than a lecture anyway. So without further ado, I will actually share my screen this time and get started. So you guys can see this, I am assuming. Let's start from the beginning. Okay. So here is our game plan for the day. I'm going to go over the learning outcomes in case you guys are doing any CEUs. I'll introduce the Lunar Center and the Healthy Monday campaign quickly, and then we'll dive right into content. So talking about what mindfulness is, what compassion is, strategies of being a mindful leader, general things for workplace mindfulness, the benefits of all of this good stuff. And then we'll talk about how to resolve conflict consciously and strategies for healthy communication. There should be time for questions at the end, but again, if you guys have anything that's surfacing in the moment, please feel free to let me know. So the 4 learning outcomes for today will be to describe the basic concept of mindfulness as we're going to talk about here, list 2 practical ways to strengthen your communication skills, list 2 practical ways to resolve conflict in the workplace, and identify 2 reasons why mindful communication can contribute to a sustainable organization. So to begin, the Lunar Center is a population and community health research center based in the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. Broadly speaking, our mission is to improve pop and community health through lots of different ways: applied research and evaluation, training student leaders, any sort of education, engaged service, community partnerships, things like presenting at conferences, advocating for evidence-based policy and practice change, a host of things. Healthy Monday is the signature program of the Lunar Center. It's a national initiative to stop the spread of chronic disease by offering a weekly prompt, tip, or program that can support people and organizations and not only starting a healthy behavior, but keeping that behavior going throughout the rest of the week. The idea here is that with a Monday intention, people would engage in that healthy behavior and then use that momentum to carry out that behavior for the rest of the week. So theoretically, we're hoping for that long-lasting and sustainable lifestyle changes over time. Programs underneath the Healthy Monday initiative are Meatless Monday, De-Stress Monday, and Move It Monday and the Monday Mile. Those are the ones that we mainly focus on addressing diet, mental health and stress management, and physical activity. So a question that I am asked some of the time is, why is this program called Healthy Monday and not Healthy Tuesday? It's a great question. So there's research by Johns Hopkins to support that people view Monday as a fresh start because Monday is the start of our traditional work week and school week. And this week setting that we live by in the Western world is actually a really important unit of time in shaping our human life. You could probably think back to the last time you referred to the week as a unit of time in conversation, whether it's I'll get to that next week or yeah, that presentation is in a couple weeks. I have plenty of time to prepare and learn how WebEx works, right? But it's just super embedded into our daily lives. And people are more likely to start a healthy behavior or kick an unhealthy behavior on Monday more than any other day of the week. And again, with this Monday intention, we're hoping to create that long-lasting behavior change. Just some fun graphics to show and support the Monday effect is what we call it. So people are more likely to have that healthy behavior on Monday. And again, this is just speaking to the sustainability of that Monday intention. So people are more likely to eat healthy Tuesday through Friday if they start that behavior on Monday. I guess it would be Tuesday through Sunday, theoretically. Questions on any of that before I move on? Cool. So now we're going to speak about mindfulness. Now, before I get into this, Mindfulness is a really complex topic, and it's stemmed in ancient Eastern traditions and dialects. I'm going to take the more secular approach to the concept for today, just talking about ways to infuse it into your daily lives and the lives of your coworkers. But there is a lot to unpack here. So I'm talking more about the secular and more, I guess, pragmatic aspects of mindfulness. But if you guys have your own experiences with this, practices, or other theories or concepts related to it, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. I could talk about this stuff for a very long time. So Jon Kabat-Zinn is said to have brought the concept of mindfulness to the Western world. Mindfulness is actually not a word in Eastern ancient language. It's a Western word, excuse me. So he says that mindfulness means that you're paying attention in a specific way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally or with an open heart. So there's intentionality with what you're paying attention to. You're paying attention to something that's happening right here, right now, not something that happened 5 minutes ago, not something that might happen 5 minutes from now, but in the present moment, and not judgmentally. So you're taking things as neutral, more or less. You're being open and accepting to any sort of circumstance or interaction that you may have. So how I like to describe mindfulness as a very basic concept is kind of through a cognitive process. So this is how I would describe someone being on autopilot. Most of us just going through our day-to-day kind of blindly, waking up, getting in the shower, grabbing that cup of coffee, going to work. Maybe now it's just walking to your living room space, but just kind of being in that habitual routine. I call it being a zombie, or kind of going through life half sleeping. So this is the autopilot. You have a stimulus and then you have a reaction. So that stimulus might be a full inbox on a Monday morning. Your reaction is your heart rate immediately starts to increase. You get overwhelmed. Your breath starts to shorten. It's getting more shallow. That's a knee-jerk reaction to that stimulus. Invoking a little bit of mindfulness, call it the mindful process, if you will, into this example. The stimulus is that full inbox. Instead of playing into that knee-jerk reaction, you take 2 or 3 seconds as just a breath. You begin to recognize maybe that there are some thoughts or feelings surfacing around this full inbox. It might be a little bit anxiety-provoking. You're experiencing this 2-second spurt of just grounding yourself in the present moment. It's that space to choose your response to the stimulus. That's essentially how I like to describe mindfulness. So you might notice here that I say reaction on the autopilot scenario versus response when we're talking about mindfulness. That's very intentional. Our brain, our body reacts to things as it's known to, right? Based off of the resources that we have in our physiology. But by practicing a bit of mindfulness, you can create a small space between the stimulus and then choose how you respond to that stimulus. Another way to look at mindfulness from a secular standpoint, essentially, there are 2 kind of broad concepts when talking about mindfulness, at least in the literature. One of which is focused attention, meaning that you can return to the present moment when you find that it's wandering, and it will wander, it's what we do. The other is attentional control, which is the ability to shift your attention from one thing to another. So it's basically just having control over your mind, being able to focus your attention on what it is you want to pay attention to in that moment. So here's Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition again, just breaking it down into a couple of bullet points. Paying attention to the present moment and relating to the present moment without judgment, without trying to avoid it, just kind of being open and accepting to what's unfolding in real time. If we're talking about mindful communication, we're talking about building relationships. So there's an aspect of mindfulness that I want to build upon with compassion, because these 2 things are very, very closely related. So the question of how compassion relates to mindfulness is kind of answered in the definition of compassion, excuse me. So Kristen Neff is a leading researcher on compassion, and she says that there's 3 components to being compassionate. There's mindfulness, just being aware, noticing someone suffering, noticing that yourself or someone else is going through a difficult time, having some sort of care or kindness component. So you're treating other people with care and understanding. You're actively trying to help them process whatever it is they're experiencing or understand where they're coming from. This can be with your nonverbals. You could, in the workplace, it's a little bit different, but you could maybe put your hand on someone's shoulder. If it's appropriate and you're both comfortable, give someone a hug depending on the situation. Just treating someone like you would a friend, just with general kindness and care. And then the common humanity piece is essentially just understanding that we are all humans experiencing this human thing called life at the same time. We all experience suffering on some capacity. It's just part of being human, it's part of this life. So having this understanding of you are not alone in your suffering is an aspect of compassion as well. Helps to strengthen the social fabric between people with that empathy component. So we have mindfulness, which is focusing your attention on the present moment. And then we have compassion, which is focusing your attention on another person, being aware of their suffering, treating them with kindness and care in that moment, and understanding that you and that person, you are both human experiencing suffering on some level. It's part of this life. I basically just explained what this slide says. So compassion is the desire to help someone ease their suffering. So layering on those components, you're aware of their suffering with the desire to help them, and you are being able to put yourself in their shoes, understand the experience of the other person and what they're going through, and the experience in which they have in front of them at that time. I'm going to pause there because I know that's a lot of information, and these concepts are very messy and complex and wonderful. So I'm going to pause again for any questions that someone might have.
So my question, when I think of mindfulness and like this process of inserting more time to react to things, the one thing that I always have a question about is what about snap decisions and like social situations where like a quick reaction is either expected of you or just like suits the situation? That's kind of always been my hang up with it.
Can you give me an example of a situation where you'd have to make a snap decision? Do you mean if you were threatened in some way?
Well, I mean, I guess one I could come up with, let's say you're in a social setting and I don't know, there's multiple people there and like the thought of the group is based upon your reaction of what you're hearing. It's kind of hard to implement mindfulness in that sort of a setting. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I'm understanding what you're saying. So I'm going to start with, and I actually don't have a slide on this, but this is a fantastic point. Mindfulness is not the solution to everything. I think it's just a way to show up in the world. So I'm not suggesting to always ignore your primal human instincts, right? There are some situations where there's a threat or there's some sort of pressure and you need to respond immediately. All I'm suggesting is, I would say like 90% of the time, most of the time, being able to check in with yourself, ground yourself down to choose a response is probably going to be helpful. So, especially in a situation where there's a threat, your core brain, the home to your fight or flight response, the amygdala, that's a super powerful part of your brain, and it is for a reason. Especially if there's a threat, you rely on your instincts to get you out of that situation with that fight or flight. So I wouldn't say to always ignore that impulse. I guess also part of being mindful is being able to choose how you respond. So you can take a minute or a second if that impulse, it makes sense. If that reaction makes sense, then do it. Is that helpful?
Yes, definitely. I'm like a huge proponent of mindfulness, but like exactly like you said, you can't apply it to every situation all the time. It's kind of just situational.
Yeah. That's a really important point. I think this word it's definitely been a buzzword. I've actually found that I don't love to use it anymore because it's kind of gotten a bad rap of like, yeah, it's been deemed be all end all of every single solution ever. And while I do wholeheartedly believe in it, I have found great benefit from it. Have witnessed benefits from other people and their practices. Um, it's not always the most adequate or effective thing, which is fine. I'm just offering strategies. Take it or leave it. Are there any other questions? Okay. So a few strategies of a mindful leader. I find the first one to be so profound because at least in my workspaces, this hardly ever happens. Pausing before a big meeting or any sort of social setting. It's called the arrival. So you might have experienced at some point all of your colleagues are rushing, well, before COVID, all of your colleagues are rushing to a meeting and everyone's kind of getting settled and the leader of the meeting rushes in and they're just like, okay, let's get started. We have a lot to go through. Instead of just diving right in when people are probably not present, they're probably still thinking about an email they forgot to send or an interaction they had at the water cooler, giving us a group of people 30 or 60 seconds to just transition from one thing to the next is huge. It creates an energy that kind of solidifies the environment, and you can feel a change if you're given just 30 seconds just to wind down and focus in on the next thing, the next meeting. Mindful leaders can also practice mindfulness on the go. So I'm involved in I'm going to go on a small tangent. I'm involved in a research study right now. We're trying to discover the core components and competencies of any sort of mindfulness-based intervention for children. I'm bringing this up because the top thing that these leaders in this field of contemplative science agree upon is that someone who's teaching mindfulness has to have a mindfulness practice of their own. They have to be able to experience and put language to what it is they're talking about because it's such a unique phenomena. So mindful leaders, I wouldn't say it's a requirement, that's a strong word, but I would really strongly encourage people to practice mindfulness on the go. And I say on the go because it might not be practical for me to request that you have a formal meditation in a quiet space or on a cushion for 15 minutes every day. It might not be suitable for your lifestyle right now. Totally fine. Understandable. There's a lot going on in the world right now. But on the go might just mean focusing on your breath as you walk to and from your car, or paying attention to the sounds in a grocery store when you're grocery shopping. Just tuning in to yourself, your senses, your surroundings when you can help to foster this idea of being mindful. And the third one, just to have that leader, that person in that authoritative role, be a little bit more level-headed, and not for nothing, just be a role model in this space. Prioritizing dedicated time in your schedule without any distractions can also be super beneficial to help the person or the leader actually be in the present moment when talking to a colleague or when running a meeting. So if you set aside time each day, an hour or so, a half hour or so, you don't check your email, there's no interruptions, you close your office door, or you tell your spouse, don't bother me for 30 minutes when you're sharing a living space in an office. This can be a really the trick is to protect that space in your calendar, which is, I think that could serve as a whole other conversation, but just another tip to try out as far as fostering a mindful leadership role. In general examples of mindfulness in the workplace, so this is more of a higher systems level approach here. Leaders could designate a quiet, well, this was also before COVID, but leaders could designate a quiet space in the office for people to go and just kind of chill out or transition from one thing to the next. If you're finding that you're working from home, blocking that into your schedule too, or having a conversation with your boss, depending on the job you have, of, hey, I'm going to take 12 to 12:30 and have that be my designated quiet time during the day just to transition, whatever it is you have to do, but having intentional time set aside for that can be really powerful. Group of guided meditations. You could do that on Zoom with all of your coworkers. That might be helpful, just fostering that sense of community and cohesion around this idea, implementing it from a higher level so everyone's committed to this sort of approach in the workplace. Encouraging walking meetings, spending time outdoors. I know I'm talking to the right people about that. Or starting a meeting with a mindful activity or just a breathing exercise. Again, just letting people answer that last email, transition from one thing to the next can be super helpful. And in that same line of thought, check-in questions, asking your coworkers, how are you actually doing? What's going on in your life? Are you going to be able to be present with us today? What's up? How are you doing? Depending on, I would say that I would use your judgment depending on the appropriateness of the situation and your relationship with that colleague. But if it's, again, becoming a more systemized way of thinking and being in your community or in your organization, then having that comfortability and environment might also foster closer connections with people. Which leads me to some benefits of infusing mindfulness into your workplace. Research has shown, this is just for workplace phenomena, but there's so many benefits of practicing mindfulness for your own mental and physical health. In the workplace, though, you have increased job satisfaction from your employees, increased engagement, increased quality of work, increased emotional regulation, so you're able to control your impulses in the sense of like you can have more mature and effective conversation in that way. You can kind of keep your emotions in check, which increases workplace relationships and sales performance. And you have decreased multitasking, burnout generally, and just tension among coworkers. And I'm curious if anyone has any other ideas of how introducing mindfulness into your organization could help or hurt. Open to discussion. Anyone have any ideas?
I have one. I think mindfulness really helps, like checking in, making sure that you're doing tasks with intention. We've been practicing things like this in our workplace, and we realized like we were doing a few things that we were doing them because it was routine. It was just what we had always done. And so now I feel like we have a little bit increased creativity because we found things that aren't exactly necessary for attaining our goals. So we're, exploring new options with those times.
That's a great example. I didn't put creativity on here, but that's phenomenal. I actually just learned about the different brain waves that we experience and what they promote. So if you are down regulating, calming your brain and your body down via mindfulness, your creativity does expand because you have theta waves flowing on in your brain. And because you're in a relaxed state, other ideas, ways of thinking, problem solving are more likely to come to you because you're relaxed versus being like having alpha brain waves, being super on edge and hyper focused, being more narrowed and focused in that way. Thank you, Christy. That was great. Anyone else?
I have one. Didn't you say like it helps your body physically as well, not only mentally and emotionally, but your body physically to calm down and have a second to think and just de-stress? It helps with your body. Like it just makes you physically healthier.
Yeah. I'd go as far to say that if mindfulness in these practices, if it's a culture in a workplace, I would go as far to say that people are taking less sick time because they're less stressed. I don't have any empirical evidence to support that, but that's just based off of anecdotes that I've heard from other people. More likely to have a conversation with your boss, say, hey, this is what's going on. I'm having a really hard time with this. But also with the increased immune function, lowered blood pressure, lower stress levels that mindfulness practices bring you, you're just probably going to be a healthier person overall. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to keep going, talk about conflict resolution in a conscious or a mindful way. So this is the notorious video that I'm going to try and share with you. But I wanted you to keep in mind when watching this, if you're more committed to being right or to learning, specifically when talking about a conflict, a disagreement that you're having in the workplace. So I'm going to start and then we're going to try this again. Let's see how this goes. So you can all see this. Ha. All right.
It went away on us.
Oh no.
It was just there and then it went away. Okay.
Cool. Thank you, Hannah. All right.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks. www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we are above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question. We are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive their idea of leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
Thoughts? Well, actually, I have some tips for you all. So, I'm curious. Thanks, Michaela. I think that video is wonderful, and I also think it's good to watch it somewhat frequently just to remind yourself to stay above the line, to be honest. I'm curious though, what do you guys think about this concept of the line of consciousness? Can you think of any triggers that pull you below the line in your day to day, particularly in your workplace? If you don't feel comfortable sharing those out, I would just encourage you to write them down so they're explicit between yourself. Um, or what phrases or concepts stood out to you in the video altogether? I'm going to open it up to the floor. No one has anything to say about that?
I can say something, I guess. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
I think this video explains so well how I've been feeling this whole pandemic. And I think just like felt like my creativity and innovation just like drain. And I think with all the restrictions, so like where I work in a nursing home, so like we're literally told like you can't go, within 6 feet of residents. You can't give them a hug. You can't have group activities. They can't get their hair cut. Has just like kept me below the line because we're constantly being told like no.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Sorry what you're experiencing right now. I cannot imagine working in a nursing home right now. That's got to be very tough. So I'm just gonna give you some info to help you understand maybe why you're feeling this way. I unfortunately don't have any magic solution to help you as far as like the pandemic goes, because those things are outside of our control. But there's this model called the SCARF model. It states 5 things that, when threatened, they basically send an emotional reaction to our core brain, which is why your creativity, your energy levels, which are lower. So those 5 things are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. I think I spelled stuff right. So it sounds like in that situation, with you being told no a lot, your autonomy is being threatened a lot. You're not able to make the choices that you once were. So it's not a solution per se, but it's just, I find that if I understand why things are happening or why I'm feeling a certain way, it helps me just process. So that might be helpful to keep in mind if you are feeling a little bit down. You can offer yourself some self-compassion in that way.
I have another thing.
Yeah.
Megan, I think my favorite line from that video was our brain doesn't know the difference between a threat, like a bodily threat, and a threat to our ego. I just feel like that's something I want to keep in mind a lot, because that is really true. Like there aren't a lot of things typically in our day-to-day life that are really threat to physical safety, but threat to ego is huge.
Yeah. That's such a good point to point out, Christy. Thank you. I mean, that's the whole idea of being mindful, right? There's more messy, complex implications of practicing mindfulness, but one of which is that your ego or your self-concept isn't always as strong, doesn't show up as strong in your day-to-day interactions, which is why you're able to relate to others more easily. But yeah, I mean, we're not living in a time where there are bears and mountain lions chasing us, trying to eat us all the time. So our environments become so cushy where these life-threatening situations are scarce. But something has to be threatened, and that something has turned into our ego. So whenever you feel like your rights have been violated or someone's not understanding you, that's aspects of the SCARF model, and that's your ego being threatened. That's why you're going to fall below the line. Having that awareness, which also, they don't say this in the video, but people don't normally live above or below the line per se. You can obviously fluctuate. So a threat to your ego would pull you below the line, but then that awareness might help to bring you back above the line. It's an old dance I like to play. But that's a fantastic point. Thank you. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep chugging on. Told you I could talk about this for a very long time. So we're going to go over a few steps to resolve conflict consciously in the workplace. Obviously, this list is not exhaustive, just some ideas to get your juices flowing in this way. The first one, when talking about ego, especially, it's a great transition. Embracing humility, assuming that you don't know what others are thinking and feeling, even if you've been working with them for 20 years. By eating a piece of humble pie and asking questions, being curious about the person's perspective or behavior or response, it leads to a growth mindset. It leads to continuous learning. It leads to being above the line. You're literally more broadened and opened to new perspectives and ideas and opinions when you are embracing humility and asking these questions. So assume you don't know what others are thinking and feeling, and become curious to learn from a genuine place to seek understanding. You're going to hear me say those words a lot. A few action steps to communicate humbly. As a leader, you want to encourage dialogue instead of debate. The difference there is basically just your intention and the delivery of your words. So a dialogue is a conversation. It's what is happening right now between you and I. A debate is any sort of political, presidential debate. It's people yelling at each other. No one's being heard. Everyone's being frustrated. Things are probably being thrown in households, right? So the difference is the delivery and the intention. Again, you want to model curiosity by asking questions to seek that understanding and give context for transparency. I can't emphasize how important this is. If there's a miscommunication between two people in a workplace, just calmly explaining why it is you did or said what you did is going to help tremendously. Just being honest and transparent with your actions is going to be the key, not only to keep that trust between two people, but to promote that sort of vulnerability and honesty moving forward. It's not easy to do. None of this is easy to do, but the results can truly be profound if it's a frequent choice that you make in the workplace. I love this. I don't know if Winston Churchill actually said we are all worms, but I do believe that I am a glowworm. I love the quote. All this is saying is set personal boundaries and stick to them. Brene Brown, if you're familiar with her work, I'm a big fan of her. She says that part of being authentic in your communication and setting these boundaries is saying no to people even when you know you're going to disappoint them. You have to be okay with that because you have to take care of yourself first. So setting personal and professional boundaries, sticking to them, not letting people walk all over you, being authentic in that way, trying to express as best you can, maybe not in that moment, but after gathering your thoughts, how it is that situation made you feel, and representing your rights and who you are as an individual can be profoundly impactful, not only for your mental health, but it establishes a sense of respect for yourself. People will learn that, hey, you're not someone to mess with. You're not someone that can be walked all over. Not saying like to get your ego out and puff out your chest, but it's just being able to abide by the personal boundaries in which you set. And by doing that, you're going to give others the courage to do the same. Avoiding tapeworms here, just trying to avoid people who drain you. So there's a couple of tapeworms who I work with, and I work with them very closely, so I can't really escape them per se. So if you work with a tapeworm, someone that you just don't really agree with, don't really get along with, do the best you can to kind of put on your emotional armor before going into a meeting or a conversation with them. Just understanding this person triggers you. You might feel compelled to say some things that might get you in trouble, but understanding that going in is really helpful. Also, just being able to remind yourself of that throughout the conversation, taking a deep breath, limiting the contact as much as you can. Work on letting go of these two things, taking things personally. I think most people are so ego-centered, and they're hanging out below the line that everything that is said to them, they take on a personal note, like everyone's out to get them. It's just not a good way to go through life. You're probably going to end up personally and not for nothing. What people say about or to you is more of a representation of them than it is of you. That's something to keep in mind. And if you're complaining or blaming or whining, you're probably below the line, which might be appropriate. Venting is okay, but staying there, constantly putting the blame on other people, not taking responsibility for your own actions, that's not a good way to especially be in a leadership role in an organization. Your employees probably won't be very happy with you. Another thing to keep in mind is to, especially in a leadership role, you might find that you're constantly delegating or asking things of your team and of other people. So you want to make sure that there's an equal balance of energy in most of the exchanges that you have with people. You want to be able to have your employees back and have your employees have your back as well. So ensuring that there's some sort of reciprocity. Obviously, there's power dynamics that come into play, and that's not to be discounted. But just saying you're appreciative or grateful of your employees' work, or not always talking to them and having them do something for you, striking up conversation about something else to get to know them as a person versus an employee also makes a world of difference. And you can't talk about communication without talking about listening. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So when talking about listening, I could do a whole other thing on active listening, but there's no time. So just to keep this rare model in mind, you want to receive the information openly. If we're talking about being mindful, so we're being non-judgmental, open, and accepting to what's happening. One of my mentors says that you lean into life with a yes. So you're not resisting or avoiding, because that's the root of suffering. You're receiving that information openly. You're appreciating the person for what they're saying. Whether you're getting fired from your job, it's a growth experience, right? That I'm saying that kind of sarcastically, but having that reframe can be helpful. Reflecting on the information and the person's nonverbals, how you're responding to the information as it's happening, and then ask those freaking questions to seek that understanding. So important. I love the peanuts. So this is just Lucy learning that listening is an important part of communication as well. So summary of the conflict resolution. You want to ask those questions to seek genuine understanding. You're not asking questions to be facetious or to try and prove your point. That means you're most likely below the line. You want to seek the other person's perspective. You can come to a conclusion or solution once both those perspectives are understood and explained. And I find this last point to be particularly powerful. You want to view others as people, not as problems. We're all just humans. We all have our own baggage, our own stuff. So treating each other with care and kindness does go a long way. And with the time we have left, I want to jump into response styles. So this is particularly for positive news. There's generally 4 ways that you can respond to positive news when you hear it. And how people respond to positive news is a better indicator of the quality of the relationship than how people respond to bad news. We're super good at empathizing, being with someone when something bad is happening, because our brains are wired towards the negative. So you can sit and cry with someone and mourn with them all day long, right? That's easy. You can get in that saddened place really easily. But what happens when someone says, I got a raise, I got a promotion, I got a new dog, I'm moving next month? Like, oh my God, congratulations, I'm so proud of you. Good job. Yeah. And then it kind of dies off, and then there's nothing really else, and then the next thing happens, and you turn on the news and whatever else it is. So I'm going to show you some ways to respond powerfully and overtly positively, I guess, to good news to strengthen those relationships. This can be particularly salient in the workplace because you don't always have a ton of time to have conversations about everyday life. So being able to take advantage of these opportunities to create high quality connections, super good. So the first one that we're going to talk about is passive constructive responding. So this is when you are happy for the person. In your response, you have low energy. Your response can maybe be delayed. You really appear not to care at all about what the person is saying. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer. Can someone give me a piece of good news, please?
It's Friday. I don't know. Does anybody? The weather is beautiful outside. That's what Anne Marie said.
Yeah, it's nice. It's kind of sunny here, I guess.
My daughter got the internship that she wanted to, starting in January.
Oh, that's cool. Wow. Good for her. That's passive constructive responding. Energy's low, not looking at you, not engaged, on my phone, don't really care that your daughter got that internship. In some, this type of response style is generally positive. I'm acknowledging what you said. So in a way, it's like I kind of heard you, but the response itself is very short, understated, does not match the enthusiasm of the person sharing the news at all. Passive destructive is when you are unhappy for the person. I call this the conversation hijacker because you completely ignore the speaker and you turn the conversation right back on yourself. This could also be known as the notorious one-upper in a conversation. Could I have another piece of good news? It could be the same piece, but if someone else wants to share.
Michelle said, oh, sorry. Who else was going? I was just going to read from the chat. Okay.
That's fine.
Michelle said, I just won $400 worth of Norwex products.
Wow. Well, I won the local lottery in my town. It wasn't like the Mega Millions, but it was like $500, and I can use it wherever I want to. And if I cash it in at a certain time, I get an interest on it, and I get another $50. So it's more money than $400. I'm like super lucky. I always get like super bratty when I do this one. But that's being passive destructive. I hardly acknowledge the good news. I focus the conversation right back on myself, and I found a way to boost my ego up, puff my feathers out. So this type of response is negative in nature and communicates a complete lack of interest in the other person's news. It's not even like you're matching the enthusiasm. You're hardly even acknowledging the person. It's like you're having a conversation with yourself. Active destructive is when you're unhappy with the person. This is also could be called the joy thief. So this is when you tell the person why their news is not good, but why it is in fact bad. You're dismissive, demeaning, and overtly negative. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna run through the next couple of examples myself. But if someone were to tell me they got a dog, my response, active destructively, would be something like, oh my God, well, you're gonna have to get all new rugs and hide your shoes because it's gonna leave a mess and it's gonna poop and pee all over and you're gonna have to take it out like a million times a day. It's probably not even worth it. So like if I were you, I would just consider putting it in a shelter. That's active destructive. These people, there's a caveat here. So the response is generally deflating. It can also damage the relationship if it's a frequent response and communicates a lack of understanding. But this type of person or response, they may not know that they're doing it. They may actually be trying to help you. They may actually be trying to prepare you for a potential negative outcome. I would argue that the timing of their response is key. So it would be more effective to active constructively respond, be with that person with their joy in that moment, and then at a later time, talk to them about some of the concerns that person might have. The last one you might guess is active constructive. This is the most positive way to respond to someone. This is when your nonverbals are with the person, so you are engaging in eye contact, you're helping them savor, stretch out the experience, so you're asking them questions. Oh my God, what was that like for you? Tell me more about that. It seems like you're really excited. Your communication's authentic, it's genuine. You're meeting the person at their level of enthusiasm too. That's also very important. So someone might tell you good news, but their energy level might be relatively low. For example, this is true. My sister is pregnant with her third child and she found out she's having a girl. I'm excited. It's good news, right? But I'm not jumping off the walls and screaming and shouting, right? So if you were to respond to me in a really super excited way, you're not matching my energy level, and I would probably think it's not genuine. But this type of response, ACR, validates the excitement of the person, offers them a chance to savor, stretch out the experience by asking those questions to get them to keep talking, and it can strengthen the connection between the people. So I would really encourage you to try this on with your colleagues whenever you can. Try it on with a partner, a friend, whatever. It can kind of be awkward at first to maybe think of questions. But even just acknowledging, wow, you seem really excited. Like, tell me more about that. Saying, tell me more, or what else, super powerful prompts to get people to keep talking. This is just a quick summary. We talked about cultivating mindfulness and compassion in the workplace, benefits of that, ways to consciously resolve conflict, asking those questions, staying above the line, choosing to constructively respond to people's good news, which ultimately strengthens your communication skills in and outside of the workplace. So, whew, I think I still managed to finish on time. I will stay on for a couple more minutes if people have other thoughts or questions, because I know I kind of ran through that very quickly, but anything that people feel compelled to share right now? Thank you, Michaela. I appreciate that.
I loved the responses. I just think that's a good mindset. I've never thought of it that way. I loved it. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I agree. I think it was good that you gave some examples, and I also appreciate your honesty and the fact that you have some people that you either currently work with or you have worked with that were not your favorite people, and you can't just always walk away, because that, I'm sure, happens to a lot of people in a lot of different situations. And so it's nice that you were honest about that.
Yeah. Not everything's always hunky-dory all the time. I actually constantly have to remind myself, like, hey, I have this information and resources. I need to use it in my everyday life, because it can be very challenging, as I'm sure you guys know.
One more thing is, in the rec field, I've been in the field for over 10 years now, and it is something where when you're working in recreation, I found that people come to you to be happy. So everybody has their own things going on, but it's more important, or it's very important for you as a professional to remain positive and be that person that people can come to. So even if you're having a bad day, you have to kind of learn how to manage that. So I just think that this really ties into all that, and the mindfulness and putting yourself into the shoes of someone else, and just feeling what they might be going through, and try to take yourself out of your own head during those times. So thank you.
That's a fantastic point. I could talk about this stuff for a very long time, but helping someone else out, or getting yourself outside of your own head, is the quickest way to shoot yourself from a negative headspace to a positive one. So I would even suggest that you seek out opportunity to talk to other people and connect if you're having a bad day. It's going to help to bring you outside of that headspace and outside of yourself, right? Because you're lost in your own thoughts when you're below the line. You're thinking about how you've lost control, about how this isn't fair to you, blah, 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 blah. You're the center of the universe. Getting yourself outside of that, even for a second, can help you like dig yourself out from below the line and say, hey, there's sunshine up here. This is nice. Yeah, writing things down, processing in that way, super cathartic. Absolutely. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, I'll let you guys go. I truly do appreciate your patience at the beginning of this call, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for being patient with me also, with technology-wise. So unpredictable, but thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Mary.
Yeah, I'm gonna type my email in the chat box if you guys have other questions or thoughts around this as your day goes on, so you have that as a contact.
All right.
Do you mind sharing where you work? Yeah, I work at Syracuse University. I work in a research center called the Lunar Center for Public Health Promotion. It's a mindful, but I can also drop that into the chat box. All right, guys. Well, thank you all so much for your time.
Thanks, Kate.
Good to see you, Christy.
You too.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.